Welcome back to Crit and Crit, where I am Axion,
I'm Sint.
and we are finishing up our playthrough of Mega Man X and our discussion of Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. We got a little bit into the second level of Sigma's Fortress before we started the recording properly. We needed to do a little bit of research before we started. So,
Yep. So last time we ran into the minor issue of, we tried to separate two topics of conversation that had a lot more crossover than might initially be expected if you don't do a whole lot of socialist stuff. So, like, last time we meant to talk about mostly the expectations of gender and as they appear in Pygmalion through the characters of Eliza, primarily Eliza, because she's the focus of this, and to hold off on talking about class distinctions and the role of social class in society till this episode, but so much of it was hinging on a lady of a certain class, as Eliza had been expected to behave and was now expected to behave, versus what would actually end up happening, that we kind of had to shelve that discussion until this time because there was just very little way to separate the two. So obviously the main contention of this is that Eliza being taught to speak and behave like a proper upper crust lady without having the actual economic situation of an upper crust lady puts her in a very dangerous position because she can't go back to the gutter that she knows, and she doesn't have the proper training or anything for anything else. Which is something that Henry Higgins doesn't even think about, and Pickering kind of brushes off as well because, well, I mean, it's never something that's really crossed his mind. But this is also something really interesting to explore with the Einsford Hill family. You have a giant mech.
yep.
So are you drift compatible, or...?
I mean, it's single pilot, so it doesn't really matter.
Drift compatible with no one. How sad. But yeah, anyway, the Einsford Hills are mentioned in the epilogue as not having this financial stability that they would normally expect. Let me find the exact quote. So, in the epilogue, it is stressed once again that Eliza did marry Freddie Einsford Hill. Complications ensued, but they were economic, not romantic. Freddie had no money and no occupation. His mother's jointure, a last relic of the opulence of Large Lady Park, had enabled her to struggle along in Earl's Court with an air of gentility, but not to procure any serious secondary education for her children, much less give the boy a profession. A clerkship at 30 shillings a week was beneath Freddie's dignity, and extremely distasteful to him besides. His prospects consisted of a hope that if he kept up appearances, somebody would do something for him. So, Eliza, having no means and very little training of any useful profession, marries a someone who's basically stands for the trope of the impoverished patrician, an upper class family without the upper class income to back that lifestyle up, leaving both Freddie and Clara in a rather precarious position. So, Eliza's business does take off eventually when it's reminded that that was something she wanted to do, but really, she and Freddie only get by at first through the help of Colonel Pickering, who is likewise in a fairly good financial position to be able to do so. Without the connections Eliza had made through Higgins and Pickering, they would be in basically the poorhouse. Because Freddie was not trained for nor interested in much in the way of work until the flower shot happens.
Yep.
Which actually, this Freddie's family's position works out pretty well for Eliza, because if they hadn't been in that position, which hadn't resulted in Freddie's sister Clara also working in a shop, there might have been a lot more objection to Freddie's marriage to her. Because obviously appearances are something to be kept up at all times, not leaving your social class too much. Like, particularly in the United Kingdom, which is obviously where it's set. This is in London, and though Shaw himself was Irish-born, he did live in the UK for quite some time, so he had much to say about it. Because Ireland and the UK, they have a history. Oh yes, they do. Are you being attacked by eyeballs?
Yes, and a flying nose.
Did you pick this level?
No, I didn't really have a choice. Ah, there we go.
At least you're not picking somebody else's nose, I guess.
Oh, and those are dead. This guy's actually the easiest one of the 3 final dungeon bosses.
But yeah, this is honestly a really interesting book to look at in terms of social class, because social mobility is fairly rare in the society in which Eliza grew up, which is why it was such a big deal for Higgins to be able to pass her off as a member of the upper crust, why it was such a big deal for her to try and better herself enough to make a modest living with a shop, why it's such a big deal that, you know, everything that happens the way it did, because, well, Eliza and Freddy both do some class migration. She goes up, he goes down, and Mr. Doolittle goes from just this ne'er-do-well gutter scamp in his, like 60s or so, to being a economically respectable person. So it's really interesting, because that's not a very common thing at all. It happened to multiple people over the course of one story for just a variety of reasons. And, like, I don't think it really gets focused enough on in American literature that social mobility is not as common as we're often led to think it is. If we get around to Gatsby at any point, we'll probably get more into that, because, well, that's the entire focus of Gatsby. But which was actually written only about 15 years after this, so it's fairly contemporary to it. Unfortunately, that will mean I have to talk about Gatsby, and it's Gatsby.
You have opinions.
I have many opinions on Gatsby. None of them are good. But we're not talking about Gatsby. We're talking about a different upper class twit.
Yep. So, this basically brings us down to the idea of the responsibility of the upperclassmen to society, and the different ways in which Higgins and Pickering tackle this particular challenge. Higgins basically acts as if he has no responsibility to society beyond his particular personal expertise. His knowledge of linguistics and his ability to educate are all that he feels he needs to provide to the world. And that's kind of where it sits.
Honestly, I wonder if there's something to be read into that, just with Higgins having such a hyperfixation on this one narrow aspect of life. There's probably a fair bit you could read into that. But something I wanted to look at was I'm still on the Eynsford Hills, specifically with Clara Eynsford Hill, where Freddy was initially unsure about proposing the idea of a shop to Eliza, because he was worried that Clara might see it as hurting her matrimonial chances, because, as mentioned before, women of a certain class were not expected to make their own living or to be, associated with that in any way. Like, it was, you get by because your family has always gotten by. Your skills are basically just managing what you already have and looking good while you do it.
And having kids.
So, yes, but... So, he's not wrong in thinking that Clara would have to be concerned about that, because, well, before you have kids, you obviously have to find an appropriate husband, which is basically what Clara would have had to do. And she would have been correct in that most people of the class she would have been expected to seek a husband in would have, looked down on her for being associated with a mere shop owner. because that's a common job. That is someone who has to make their own living, and that is just capital N, not done. But it is mentioned that an event highly unexpected by Freddy's mother. Clara, in the course of her incursion into those artistic circles which were the highest within her reach, discovered that her conversational qualifications were expected to include a grounding in the novels of Mr. H.G. Wells, which surprised me because, well, I've heard of Wells, but only in the sense of, like, he has written many science fiction classics, Time Machine, The Invisible Man, not to be confused with Invisible Man, they are two very different books, but what I didn't know was that Wells was also known for his social reform, because I read Wells when I was kind of too young to pick up on social commentary, you know, like middle school, because, you know, I wanted to read for time travel, because surface level reading when you're, you know, 13. So being engrossed in his writings and wanting to know more and getting involved with this makes her more open-minded and amenable to the ideas, and yeah. And Clara, who appeared to Higgins and his mother as a disagreeable and ridiculous person, and to her own mother as in some inexplicable way a social failure, had never seen herself in either light. So, to some extent ridiculed and mimicked like everybody else in West Kensington, she was accepted as rational and normal sort of human being. So, she didn't really get why people saw her as kind of silly and frivolous, but she did recognize that she wasn't happy and, well, started trying to find a way to make herself happy. Her one asset, the fact that her mother was with the Epsom greengrocer called the Carriage Lady, had no exchange value, apparently. It had prevented her from getting educated because the only education she could have afforded was education with the greengrocer's daughter. It had led her to seek society for mother's class, and that class simply would not have her because she was much poorer than the greengrocer, and far from being able to afford a maid, could not afford even a housemaid, and had to scrape along at home with an illiberally treated general servant. So, as a product of being brought up in her mother's class, despite not being able to afford it, she can't fit in there because she can't afford it. So, Clara has been done a disservice as well. Freddy married down to get out of it and has to make his own living. But Clara basically has been raised to expect she's going to be able to marry up, and that's not really an option because she doesn't really have much in the way of a dowry, which is still a thing. Like, you have to have an income. Like, you have to be able to provide for yourself in some way. So, yeah. And meeting Eliza turned out to be really good for her, too, because once she learns that, well, Eliza was a flower girl in the gutter just a few months ago, and look what she's made of herself, well, it gives Clara some hope. So, yeah.
Yep. And interestingly enough, she ends up happy in the end. She more or less gets over her infatuation with Higgins, thank goodness. I believe it passively mentions that she does eventually get married, but I don't know if it ever mentions to who, and I don't think it's particularly important. It does. What's important is that it specifies she ends up happy and makes something of her life.
Yep, she does have to work for a living, which, you know, scandalous to that class, but she can't really be accepted in that class anyway, so it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It is also mentioned that, like, Eliza and Freddy struggle with their business for a fair bit because, neither of them has ever learned anything about actually running a business. Like, Eliza knows how to pick flowers and cajole people into buying them, which is a skill. Salesmanship is a skill, to be sure. But, like, setting prices, procuring things at the most efficient price, and everything to do with that is, well, something she never really learned. So, yeah. learning bookkeeping and typewriting with incipient junior clerks, male and female, from the elementary schools. Let me not dwell. There were even classes at the London School of Economics and a humble personal appeal to the director of that institution to recommend a course bearing on the flower of business. So, yeah. They struggled for a bit, but eventually the shop does come into its own and start making money. They get a lot of support still from Higgins and Pickering, even if they're not actually like running the business for them. They're still like, hey, we can pay for a dinner for you at some point. And yeah. Plus, well, they do have the fact that, like, even if they're not really part of the upper class anymore, the fact that, well, Henry trained her to speak that well, and the fact that Freddie still sounds like a very nice, friendly gentleman does attract a certain level of clientele and respectability.
Yep. And they make a success of themselves. They make a happy life for themselves. They go on about their business and the rest of their lives, and they succeed at their eventual goals, and in many ways, in spite of Higgins more than thanks to him. For, as we've already stated, Higgins, for all that he taught Eliza, only really taught her how to blend in a very superficial sense. And there's so much to the concepts of being part of the nobility, and the upper class, rather, that Higgins does absolutely nothing to teach her.
Yep, I just feel the need to point out, apropos of nothing right now, that it's been really weird to watch this game, because literally the only thing I know about Mega Man is, I read Bob and George back in the day, which tells you that I'm a dinosaur. So it's really weird seeing these sprites right now, and I've been trying not to say that this entire time to distract from it, but there you go. There you go.
I remember the Bob and George days. Don't feel bad.
Well, that's because you're older than me, which makes you a double dinosaur. Which sounds like it should be a video game, doesn't it, Double Dinosaur?
I mean, there's Double Dragon.
Not the same thing.
No, it's not.
But yeah, it's interesting that, like, Shaw just felt the need to put all this in the epilogue of just packing into exactly what happens to everyone. That is all. That is how it turned out. It is notable that as though Eliza never nags her husband, and frankly loves the Colonel as if she were his favorite daughter, she has never got out of the habit of nagging Higgins that was established on the fatal night when she won his bet for him. She snaps his head off on the faintest provocation or on none. He no longer dares to tease her by assuming an abysmal inferiority of Freddy's mind to his own. He storms and bullies and derides, but she stands up to him so ruthlessly that the Colonel has to ask her from time to time to be kinder to Higgins, and it is the only request of his that brings a mulish expression into her face. So yeah, Higgins got through most of the play treating Eliza like crap and bossing her around and making sure that she knew he was her better, to the point where she has developed a very, very hair-trigger response to it, and he regrets it so much.
Yep. There's gotta be a weapon that does more damage to this guy.
Have you tried insulting him?
I can't make Mega Man talk outside of cutscenes. Alas.
Higgins would be upset. Oh hey, maybe this is Henry Higgins.
I mean, he did tell me that I was almost as good as he used to be.
So, maybe he can teach you how to speak.
I think he mostly wants to teach me how to be Darth Vader. Unfortunately,
join me. We can diagram sentences together.
Unfortunately, I don't have a lightsaber in this game. I think you can get one in later games. But in this one, all
But
I
how
have
can
is
you
gun.
make a cutting remark without a lightsaber?
I have razor-bladed boomerangs.
That'll suffice. Or you can just use the gun and shoot your mouth off.
I mean, I am doing that. Alright, final boss time!
Yay! But yeah, I'm kind of running out of stuff to say on Pygmalion at the moment, so I think we're just going to sit back and watch the boss fight.
Yep. I think Sigma has a thing for dogs. I think it's this one?
Okay, I take it back. I did know something else about Mega Man, but going into this, it's that, like, everyone had a very standard naming convention. That it was basically just adjective man or verb man, and they would do that thing. And then this game broke it by giving us weird animals that you might have to see acted out on a charade at some point, very badly.
I'm probably gonna die.
Yeah. Don't you have your healing thing?
I used them up.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, you're probably gonna die.
Why did it get off the thing I was attacking with?
Might as well just let it happen. Because like, you have like one hit left. You're gonna go down anyway.
I used to be able to play this game all the way from start to end without taking damage, but that was back when I was a little kid and I had all the time in the world to just.
And when you were, and you know, you also weren't doing English homework at the same time as playing the game.
I mean, there's that too, yes.
Though, granted, we've stopped talking about the place, so you've lost that excuse.
Yep. I went the wrong direction. Alright, we're gonna pause and get back to that stage of the fight, so be right back. And we're back, and let's finish this up.
So, why Sigma?
You mean why is that his name?
Yeah, I mean, like, I thought Wily was the boss. The villain of Mega Man.
So, Mega Man X series takes place a long time after the original Mega Man series. By this time, Wily, etc. are all, you know, dead, because they're humans. But before that storyline ended, Wily created his most powerful robot ever that even Mega Man couldn't touch. So Dr. Light created Mega Man X, but to make sure that Mega Man X wouldn't go rogue, he put him away in like a basically an AI testing chamber where he stayed for a couple hundred years, chilling out and undergoing ethics tests, more or less. I used to be a lot better at dodging those. And in that time, robots would go Maverick, which was basically is a fancy term for they got a computer virus that made them evil. And one of the robots that went Maverick was Sigma, who was a Maverick hunter. He tracked down and eradicated robots that were infected with the computer virus. On one such mission, he got infected himself and went rogue, as you do.
Okay then.
And the other Mega Man Mega Man X games are just, since Sigma is a robot, technically he's a program, he can just be uploaded to a new body every time he dies. So whenever he gets destroyed, he just comes back later with a different operating system. I'm gonna go ahead and heal,
Probably a good idea.
just to make sure I don't take an accidental hit while I'm not paying attention.
Well, it looks like you're almost done.
Yeah. Yeah, this guy's not that hard. I would have beaten him last time if I hadn't come in with such low HP. And done.
Yay!
And that brings us to an end to Mega Man X, and to our discussion of Pygmalion. Any closing thoughts?
Well, it's always interesting to look at the original text of something, because, like I mentioned way back at the start, I was mostly familiar with Pygmalion from being a theater geek and really liking My Fair Lady, because it had a lot of fun songs in it. So it was interesting to actually read the full thing and see a lot of the commentary that had been put into it that I didn't actually know was in there. So, yeah, I'm not really an expert on Pygmalion, or really most things we're going to talk about, but it was fun.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I didn't even know it was a play until you told me so. I was introduced to it from the movie My Fair Lady, which I saw, like, way back when I was young. And, it has been quite some time since I saw it. So, rereading the play refreshed my memory on a lot of things, and I noticed a lot of things that were different, like we mentioned in prior episodes, things like the racehorse scene and some other stuff that wasn't in the original play that got added to the stage adaptation and to the movie to kind of flesh things out. Had out the running time, you might say, though I'm not sure that's quite the right way to put it, since they're clearly more entertaining than just filler. But yeah, this has been an entertaining experiment, and I'm looking forward to us keeping going. Do you want to tell the crowd what we're doing next?
Let's let it be a surprise for now.
Alright, all I will say is dress warmly. It's gonna get cold.
Dude, let it go.
No, not like that.
Too late.
I have been Axion,
And I'm Sit.
and this has been Crit and Crit, and we will see you next time.
Bye!